but the competitive fire will come out. And at the end of the day, you find ways to get it done.
You are Locked On Fantasy Basketball, your daily fantasy basketball podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball podcast brought to you by Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd and I am the lead fantasy analyst at basketballmonster.com, and you can find me on Twitter as always at redrock_bball. We are doing the first of the 2019-20 NBA season preview podcast. I get one of the hosts of the Locked On Podcast Network team podcasts on, and we talk about that team from a fantasy basketball perspective. We are starting it off with today's show, and over the next couple of weeks, you're going to get a very, very steady diet. We're looking to get all 30 teams done in the next 2 weeks. So you're going to have lots of content to sift through during that time. And of course, to start things off, as you can see by reading the description, looking at the graphics on the screen here if you are watching the video, we're going to be looking at the Golden State Warriors to kick things off. So, Michael Bolton.
Let's get to it.
Let's get to it indeed. All right, so to talk about the Golden State Warriors, let's bring in the host of the Locked On Warriors podcast. Charles Hamilton is back with me to do this again. Charles, welcome back to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man.
All right, so this Golden State Warriors team, everybody knows that it does look quite different to how it looked last season, so that opens up quite a bit from a fantasy basketball perspective. I like to start, because this is the first one of them I'm doing for the year, and I'm going to start all these shows by just doing an injury update, and of course there is a big injury here with this Golden State Warriors team, Charles. Klay Thompson tore his ACL in the NBA Finals, going to miss a big chunk of this season. When are we, at this point, expecting Klay Thompson to return?
Yeah, that's the thing. The last thing we've heard is that hopefully around the All-Star break, and most likely after. But one of the things with that and just the entire season is there's only 27 games left after the All-Star break. So how that affects them throughout the entire season, and that's assuming he plays every single game after the All-Star break. But, we'll see when we get there. But right now the projection is after the All-Star break.
I have, let's ask you this question then. Your over-under, if I set the over-under at 20.5 games played for Klay Thompson, what would you take?
I'd go over,
Okay.
But you set it at, 30.5. I'd probably have to say under. But yes, he'll be somewhere in the 20s, I'd say.
And the way we saw Golden State handle DeMarcus Cousins last season is he didn't play that many minutes, and I think a similar sort, obviously a different player, a different body type, a different injury with Klay Thompson, but a similar sort of thing would be expected. He's not coming out and just banging 35 minutes a night for those 20 games that he's back.
Exactly.
So what that means to me is that Klay Thompson's not a draftable player in fantasy basketball. You're not going to have him for the first 50 to 60 games of the season. And then when he comes back, he's not going to be the same guy. And his game does require volume in terms to have value in fantasy, because he needs to hit those 20 points a game. He needs to hit 3.5, 4 threes a game. And he's not going to do that in 25 minutes a night. We've seen a history of guys coming back from ACL injuries. Zach LaVine, Jabari Parker, a couple of guys recently who see their field goal percentage drop off in that first season back. And that could be another issue for Klay. So for me, he's an undraftable player in most standard fantasy leagues. When he comes back, do you see him playing more of the three this year, Charles?
He's going to have to initially. It's just the way the roster's constructed right now. And you did what you had to get DAngelo Russell. It was a great way to get something back for Kevin Durant, but it's not ideal because he's a combo guard, so he's definitely playing in the backcourt. And even though I do believe Klay can play some three, it takes away some of what his size advantage at the two. So I do think it'll be a three-guard lineup, and they may do a pretty extreme stagger like you saw in Houston, and probably will see again in Houston, where, they technically all start together, but a lot of DAngelo Russell in the second unit basically leading that, I think we might see as well. But he's definitely going to have to play some three in a three-guard lineup.
Well, that brings us on to DAngelo Russell. Let's talk about him now, obviously coming across as the big acquisition this offseason. Russell put up some pretty strong numbers last season, had his first All-Star berth, and now heads across to the Golden State Warriors to start in the backcourt alongside Steph Curry. A lot of people say, oh yeah, now he's going to be the number 2 guy in Golden State compared to in Brooklyn. That's going to hurt his fantasy value. I actually think it's the other way around, to be honest, because last season he played just 30 minutes a night for the Brooklyn Nets. Over the last 25 games of the season, he got up to 31 minutes a night, and he was the 32nd ranked player in fantasy during that time. He's not playing just 30 minutes a night for Golden State, is he, Charles?
Absolutely not. I mean, he's going to be up around 35, I'd say, especially considering he's 23. There's no reason to worry about his minutes yet. And I think he's going to reap the benefits of playing next to Steph Curry. Steph makes other players better, especially in the backcourt. I wouldn't be surprised if he matches not just minutes, but I mean, he's gonna get more minutes, but at least matches his stats as well. Efficiency may go down, but he's gonna get as many shots as he wants because there just isn't many options on this Warriors team outside of him and Steph, basically.
We're going to talk more about the projected starting 5 a little bit later, but in that projected starting 5, it's going to be him and it's going to be Steph, and I don't know what's going to happen in terms of other people taking shots. It's going to be those 2 guys, so the minutes are going to go off for DAngelo Russell. He's going to have this opportunity, and to me, if he finishes the season as a top 20 fantasy player, I wouldn't be surprised. I'm not sure, I definitely wouldn't take him there, but I put a fair degree of confidence in saying that DAngelo Russell's overall fantasy rank this season is going to be higher than what it was last season. And at the moment, on both Yahoo and ESPN, he is coming in as a real value option on those sites just because of those reasons that we mentioned. He is going to play those more minutes, and he's going to have to take a lot of shots with how this team is currently constructed. That does bring me to the next thing, Charles. The starting small forward, it was Kevin Durant. It could have been Andre Iguodala. Of course, he is now in Memphis and could be in limbo, depending on when you listen to this podcast of where he's going. He could be on another team by that time when you're listening to this. But who is going to start at small forward for this team?
Jeez, you or me, I guess. No, probably, the money's on Alfonso McKinney at this point. He's the truest small forward that they have. The other guys that you're penciling in there are, I don't know, kind of big shooting guards like Alec Burks and Glenn Robinson. McKinney knows the system, and it's tough to say. He's probably their best option at this point, unless Burks or Glenn Robinson have I guess it would be a bounce back from a couple years ago for Glenn Robinson, and Burks, has a career year. It's going to be Alfonso McKinney, and you'll have to play to his strengths. He's a great offensive rebounder. He started off hot from 3 last year, but definitely fell off in the second half of the season. Money's on McKinney, and then who knows beyond him. But it's basically by default right now.
I think it's going to be McKinney as well. I think his minutes are going to push to be the highest out of that group. He doesn't provide much from a fantasy point of view. You mentioned his rebounding. He does have a solid rebound rate. He did shoot the ball okay last season. I don't trust that completely. He was at like 60% on his 2-pointers, which doesn't seem like something that's going to stick. So he is, I think, a relatively solid deeper league sort of player, but just because he's starting doesn't mean he's going to be a valuable option for most fantasy formats. I don't think we need to pay too much attention to Alfonso McKinney. A name you did mention that's interesting to me is Alec Burks coming across. Now, Burks was pretty poor last season for Cleveland and for Sacramento, but he, to me, profiles as someone who, especially in the early part of the season, is going to get a fair chunk of playing time, either coming behind DAngelo Russell or playing there at the 3 as well. Because we talk about the Russell and Curry pairing, but behind those guys, it's pretty thin in that backcourt as well, and he's going to have to play some minutes at the 3 and the 2, Alec Burks. What can he bring to this team?
A somewhat reliable 3-point shot. I think he shot about 35% last year, and I think that's kind of around where his career average is, 35, 36, which Warriors would be pretty ecstatic with because they haven't had really any luck getting 3-pointers off the bench, besides Nick Young for a season, and he brought a lot of other problems that, it was nice that he could hit threes at a solid rate, but, had, like I said, other problems. So Alec Burks, at least a young veteran. I think he's 27, so it's not the over the ring chasing type, because the ring chasing's kind of over in Golden State. He's not the David West last leg, so he'll definitely get his opportunities. I do think it'll mostly be at the small forward because of the fact that they have Jordan Poole, who I think the first rounder will get as many opportunities to succeed or fail as he needs, because there's just no other options. But especially early in the season, Alec Burks is going to get a lot of looks. I would expect him to be actually the primary backup small forward.
Yeah, I expect him to get probably in excess of 20 minutes per game over the course. Now, if he can stay healthy, he's had knee problems in the past. Mm-hmm. He can provide some okay deep fantasy league value. He can get some assists. He can score a little bit as well. He does have flashes where you go, oh man, look at this guy putting it together, and then it never lasts. That's just the case with Alec Burks, and he is 28 years of age at this point as well. So I don't think we should be expecting too much deviation there. The other big question outside of the starting small forward, not that even has too much of an impact on fantasy, but this next one, Charles, does have a big impact. The starting center, or more importantly, the center who plays the most minutes. We saw DeMarcus Cousins last season there, but now we're left with Kevon Looney, and they just signed Willie CauleyStein. So I'll start with who do you think will be the starting center on this team?
Starting center is Willie CauleyStein for me. Steve Kerr has shown an affinity for classic centers. He, a 7-footer with some weight, even though Willie CauleyStein isn't exactly the heaviest. He's not a Zaza or a DeMarcus Cousins. He at least can, with his length, be thought of as a rim protector. Yep. If he's in the right position, you'll at least think twice about driving through the lane. Where Looney, I'll wait for you to ask, because Looney's the answer to what I think is your next question about who will play the most. But I do think Willie CauleyStein will get the starts, and he has the ability to. I think Warriors fans will like him a lot because he has the ability to give you a 20-point game, 10, 12 rebounds. He'll be similar to what JaVale was, and I know people laugh at that, but look, JaVale was a center that the Warriors hadn't had in a long time. Just the ability to really capitalize off of all the attention and gravity that Steph and Klay and now DAngelo Russell will get, and put up some points. So I do think at least the fans will like him, and he'll get some numbers. But he also has been inconsistent in his career, and I'm sure there will be games where we don't see much of him either.
Willie CauleyStein has never had a top 100 season for fantasy basketball, and as a center who is close to 7 foot, he blocked 0.6 shots per game last season in 27 minutes per game, and that's obviously really, really poor. Doesn't hit threes, averaged 12 and 8.5, and has been given every opportunity in Sacramento to do this. Now, I agree with you. I think he will be the starting center. I also think he won't be the center that gets the most minutes per game, and to me, at this point, he is significantly overvalued in the early fantasy ranks that have come out, with both Yahoo and ESPN having him around the top 100. He's never been that high ever in his career. And I think that his playing time is going to go down significantly here in Golden State. And so the question that brings me to now, Charles, is who's finishing games and who's playing the most minutes? It is Kevon Looney, isn't it?
It's absolutely Kevon Looney. If Steve ever wanted to start him, it would make complete sense. But it reminds me of Andre Iguodala, where he could have been starting, when Harrison Barnes was there, but it just made sense for him to come off the bench. That's his role. And, just because you're coming off the bench and not starting doesn't mean you're not the better player or getting more minutes. I'd expect him to be around 28 or so a game, which is a lot for him, but I think he'll be fine handling it. They've kind of, handled his minutes kind of funny over the years, where they like to keep an eye on him, where, they say he's not a 35-minute-a-game guy for whatever reason. Maybe it's because he's a little undersized, but, I would expect 28 minutes or so from him, and he's definitely the best center that they have. And getting him for the price they got him to was pretty huge.
I think that he's going to be right up around that 28 to 30 minute mark this season. I think he's going to be close to a top 100 fantasy player. He's a guy that can block shots better than Willie CauleyStein. He can get steals as well. He can score. He flashed some passing ability in the playoffs. He had some pretty solid games there, a 12 and 14 game against the Blazers. He showed some ability to create some shots for himself, some double-digit scoring games. He remains efficient all the time. To me, he is a significantly better fantasy investment than what Willie CauleyStein is. And if he plays fewer minutes than CauleyStein, then that is negligence on either Kerr's part, or it means that CauleyStein has all of a sudden become a completely different player. I think also part of the reason with Looney, Charles, is he had all those hip problems, and I think that has that's caused a bit of a problem in terms of easing him in over the course of his first 4 seasons in the NBA. Is they are worried about how that will go. He's still only 23 years of age, which feels like he's been around forever, but he is still quite young and can still keep getting better and getting better. And I think this is the year we finally see Kevon Looney NBA finisher rather than starter, because again, he's probably not going to start the games. But there is some significant value in what he can do for this Golden State Warriors team, and he has fantasy value.
he missed his first 2 years with the hip problems. And you said it, finisher, especially now with the elements of the death lineup basically not available for the Warriors, where they don't have a 3 that can move up to the 4 or just a stretch 4 that can fill in where Draymond can play the 5. I think Kevon Looney's going to get tons of time in those closing lineups. He's definitely, might not start, but definitely a top 5 player on this team, no question.
Let's talk about a guy that's, I'd say he's probably a top 5 player on this team, and that is, of course, Steph Curry, who's going to have to take on a larger load. Now, Curry, a couple of years ago, was the number 1 fantasy player pretty easily back in those MVP seasons. Of course, Kevin Durant arrived, and it did drop his overall value down, but Curry is going to have to take on a larger load in terms of playing time, in terms of usage, and in terms of just being the man who can take this team and hopefully push them back into the playoffs. Now, when Durant arrived, he went from the number 1 fantasy player from 2 consecutive seasons down to the number 5 guy. That was a drop in his usage. Now, usage didn't drop that much. It went from 33 down to 31. It's not a significant drop. Part of the reason some of his value dropped down was the fact that his steal rate also fell off. He'd been averaging 2 steals per game over his 2 number 1 fantasy seasons, and then last year all the way down to 1.3. So that's one of the things that I think that we do have to look at when talking about Steph. But he is going to have to play more minutes. He's going to have to take way more shots. And I think, I'll put this to you, Charles. Do you think that Steph can average 30 points a game this season?
Oh, definitely. I mean, I think first off, anyone saying, 2016 Steph is coming back, I don't know if we'll ever see 2016 Steph again. That might just be a complete outlier. But I do think that he can and will have to if this team is going to make the playoffs or even, just be in conversation with them, because they just don't have the offensive firepower unless, of course, some of these unknowns, some of these rookies really step up, which is less than likely. It's going to be all about Steph and DAngelo Russell for, 3/4 of the season at the very least, and see what you got when Klay comes back. But I almost expect him to score 30 this year because it's just going to be needed.
I think it's going to be the best scoring season of his career. His MVP season, he was just on 30. I think he can go above that. I think he's going to hit the most threes per game in his career as well. The steals might keep him away. But to me, there's about 4 or 5 players definitely in the consideration for number 1 pick in fantasy. Curry is one of those. You do have to worry about some of the injury concerns that he has had the last couple of years, knee injuries in the playoffs, ankle problems, and that sort of takes a bit away from him. It's not like a chronic one thing that continually keeps happening to him, but the Warriors aren't going to have the level of luxury that they've had in previous seasons, where if something's 5% off, that he's going to sit down, because he's going to have to play through it. Otherwise, with how the Western Conference looks, maybe they don't make the playoffs. Maybe they finish in the 8th seed. Yeah. It's not going to be they're cruising through to home court advantage like in previous seasons.
No, definitely not. And Steph played 69 games last year. That is pretty close to the minimum that he will have to play for this team to make the playoffs this year. Just because, like I've been saying, and you've been saying it, man, they are thin.
Well, let's talk about the other star on this team now. That is Draymond Green, who has seen his numbers drop off quite a bit. His fantasy value, in his peak, he was a top 20 fantasy guy, but we've seen the usage, the scoring, the three-point shooting fall off really significantly. I don't think that the three-point shooting, he had that one weird, much like Russell Westbrook, had one weird, really good three-point shooting season in where he shot 39 in 15-16, and then he's been at 31, 30 and 29 last season from 3. But I guess on the positive side, over the final 26 games of last season, Green shot 34% from 3, and that's what he's going to need to do. I think he's going to have a spike in his usage. He was down at 13% usage last season. I think that goes back to around the 17 or 18 that he'd been in previous seasons. The defensive stuff will still be there. I think we can see his assists going back to over 7 per game, but I don't think he's going back to that peak area where he was a top 20 fantasy guy, but I think he can do better than what he was last season, where he averaged where he was the 46th ranked player. He's going to have to take on a larger offensive role, though, isn't he?
Oh, no question. Especially considering the backup point guard spot is
it's interesting.
Jacob Evans at the moment.
Yep.
Yeah, it's interesting. They're going to try Jacob Evans, who's more of a 2-guard, but not much of a scorer. And he's I don't know. He looked okay at times during summer league. You don't want to take too much from it, but he could basically end up being the backup point guard, a couple weeks into the season. He's definitely that usage will go up. The scoring will go up. The 3-point shot, I mean, if he could all of a sudden just be a consistent 34% three-point shooter, it would be such a boost to the Warriors. That's the worst part. Is you mentioned the 2015-16 season, he shot 39%, and then everything else has been around 30. So, I mean, if he can get that back up just to below average, it would be such a boost to the Warriors in this offense. And he's going to have to. And, yeah, so usage definitely back up. Assists will be back up. Defense will still be there. The scoring, the efficiency in scoring, and the three-point shot, crossing my fingers, but I don't know if it'll happen or not.
Well, Draymond's been under 10 points per game for the last couple of seasons. I'm pretty confident it's going to go back above 10. Now, if he goes from a 30% three-point shooter to a 35% three-point shooter, as weird as this sounds, in fantasy, that can actually take him from being a guy who might be the 40th or 35th best player to being the 25th, because percentages influence so many categories. If his three-point shooting goes up, it influences his scoring category, it influences his three-pointers made category, and it influences his field goal percentage category. So one little thing, if that changes, it has a big impact right across his number. So that's the swing point for Draymond. If he stays at 30, then maybe he's not going to go back to anywhere near where he was in the past. But if that goes up and it's a renaissance and it's 34 or 35, which is still below average, but better than where he's been, then it has a big impact on what his overall numbers are. So he is an interesting player, but I would almost guarantee that scoring is going to jump back up to at least into double digits, which it hasn't been for a while now. Charles, you touched on Jacob Evans, who I did want to talk about him because he is likely to be the backup point guard. We saw him run that at Summer League. He was lost last season, 34% shooting overall, played just 7 minutes a game, averaged 1 point per game. But this is going to be a little bit of a different role. Did he play point guard much for Santa Cruz in the G League last season?
No, he was off the ball. I mean, this is a new thing. About a little after halfway through the season, the report came out. They're going to try and move him to point guard and see what he can do, and they believe in him and this and that and all the standard stuff from the Warriors. I just can't help but think back to when they tried to have Kent Bazemore play point guard in his second year, and that one did not work out so well. But he did show some flashes during the Summer League, did have a lot of turnovers also. It's kind of out of necessity at this point since they just don't have anyone else. I wouldn't be surprised if Jordan Poole might get an opportunity eventually, but it's Jacob Evans, and he's definitely more of a defender than anything. And it's also a way to try and just make him more effective offensively, and probably not scoring. But one of the main things with him last season was he could defend, he could stay on the floor defensively, but offensively, once he got the ball, it was a zero. He just didn't know what to do with it, couldn't score. So I maybe they're hoping this can make him effective offensively. They can help keep him on the floor, but I don't know. We'll just have to wait and see. But he is definitely getting the first crack at that backup point guard spot.
In the 7 Summer League games that he played, on a per 36 basis, he averaged 19, 7, and 5 with over a steal and over a block per 36, shot 96% from the free throw line and 36% from 3. Now, they're probably not going to be able to stick at that level, but that's definitely encouraging that he able to shoot better with the ball in his hands, generate assists, play defense as well. And he does have some upside there for deeper leagues, because as you mentioned, that role is going to be there. They literally don't have any other options to fill this role. So he's going to have that opportunity, and he does have that defensive ability. And if he can start generating assists, we all know in fantasy that if someone generates assists and gives you 3.5 assists, 4 assists, which at times he'll be able to do, but if at deeper leagues, that's really, really hard to get that sort of value. And Evans is going to have first crack at filling that role, and of course they're going to stagger and play DAngelo Russell sometimes in that role also, but Evans is going to have a role in the rotation, which brings me, Charles, to talk about this Golden State rotation. And this is a team who's had a fairly set rotation, but there's so many guys who just aren't here anymore. They picked Jordan Poole in at the first round, and then 2 second-round guys in the draft in Eric Pascal and Alan Smailagic. Do you think there will be any rookies in their opening night? Let's say Steve Kerr uses a 10-man rotation. Any rookies will be in that rotation?
Whew, that's a good question. Steve does like veterans, but at the same time, they are very high on Eric Pascal at the moment. Speaking of the small forward conversation we had earlier, Eric Pascal is no question a power forward at 6'7", 255. But if he can hang defensively with small forwards, you might see him actually get some time there behind McKinney, just because of, like we said, they have no one else that they can play there. And it's a big if, but they are very high on him. So Wouldn't be surprised to see him, especially in that backup power forward spot, just because, again, there's no one really else they can play there. I would play him before Amari Spellman, who, is kind of more of a center at this point. So Eric Paschall, definitely. Jordan Poole, opening night is probably tough. I think you'll see Alec Burks and Glenn Robinson get those opportunities before Jordan Poole, but I do think Jordan Poole will be getting opportunities throughout the season, because that's part of it as well. Is you mentioned all the players that aren't here anymore. This is yes, they still want to make the playoffs, they still want to be good, but at the same time they want to start developing young players, because it's something that they haven't done a great job at over this title run they've had over the last 5 years. So the young guys will get opportunities. Eric Paschall, I would pencil in for opening night. Jordan Poole probably later in the season.
I agree with you on Pascal. I actually think Poole might be in the rotation opening night as well. It depends what sort of, because they need shooting. This has always been a case for the team. Yeah. For as good of a team that in terms of having the best shooters, Klay and Steph and KD, after those guys, no one could shoot. And now Klay and KD are both gone. DAngelo Russell comes in, but there's no one who can shoot. And if Poole shows any ability to knock down threes, I think he'll be in there in the rotation. In terms of my opening night 10-man rotation, I think the starters are pretty set. Curry, Russell, Green, CauleyStein, and McKinney at small forward, as we mentioned. Looney coming off the bench, Jacob Evans coming off the bench, Alec Burks coming off the bench. And I think those last two spots will be Pascal and Poole. Now, Glenn Robinson could jump in there. But when you look at this rotation, maybe he goes with Damian Lee initially, just because the G League season hasn't started, so that doesn't count against their two-way days as well. So he has some trust in Damian Lee, but there are huge holes open here, and for deeper leagues, getting guys like Jordan Poole and Eric Paschall, who are far down the rankings on these sites, I think they're going to have to play a much more significant role than, say, what we saw from Jacob Evans as their first-round pick last season, where he played 30 games and 7 minutes a night. I feel pretty confident that both Poole and Paschall will exceed those numbers without any hesitation at all. And if Poole can shoot, then deeper leagues, look at him as sort of a 1-3 a game sort of a guy on okay percentage. That would be interesting to see if he could provide that. The other guy that they picked was Alen Smailagic, who played in the G League for Golden State. I don't think we'll see him as much this season, but the talk I hear from league people is that Warriors love him, but there's also a lot to like about Smailagic moving into the future, and maybe he could find himself as a rotation role as early as next season.
Yeah, definitely. I actually thought they might sign him to a two-way deal. I do think he'll spend most of his time in the G League this year, where he spent all of last year. And yeah, the Warriors, I mean, they did everything possible to make sure they got him. One of my favorite moves in the draft, who David Griffin, I think, has had one of the best.
It was great.
Off seasons of anyone, like ever, knows the Warriors wanted to pick him at 41. David Griffin had pick 39. And so he just drafts him. I don't know if he even wanted him, but drafts Alen Smailagic, and the Warriors call him up and offer 2 second-rounders to get him. And David Griffin takes those 2 second-rounders, flips those into Derek Favors. One of my favorite moves of the entire offseason by David Griffin. And, Warriors got their guy who they've been coveting for a long time. And for an 18-year-old to play well in the G League last year is a pretty big deal, going up against grown men. And you saw some real flashes during summer league. So I do agree with you. I think next season, not this upcoming season, but next year, he will definitely be in the rotation, whether it's at, backup 4 or 5.
I think we've touched on nearly everyone on this team. We talked about Amari Spellman, who came across in the Damian Jones trade. I don't have any hopes for him as a player, really.
Yeah.
The only guy we haven't talked about or even mentioned their name is their other two-way guy, Kai Bowman, point guard out of Boston College, I believe. We've seen the Warriors use that two-way slot. Damian Lee back again for a second crack at it. Again, we talk about the lack of point guards. There is an opportunity, I guess, for Bowman to come in and at least play some minutes if they are running desperate for point guards, because that's a position that they are pretty thin at.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's a great point. He only got to see him really during summer league, and people make a Patrick Beverley type comparison where he's, a bulldog defensively, a better shot than Beverley at his age. And yeah, there's definitely potential for him to get some, 45 games or 45 days of backup point guard time with the Warriors. I do think it will be, it means things haven't gone very well for the Warriors.
Yeah.
If we do see a good amount of Kai Bowman. But for the future, I mean, he's an intriguing player.
He's a guy. Well, his summer league numbers were pretty ugly. 28% from the field, 25% from the free throw line. It did average 2 assists in 16 minutes, but he is a guy that can come in and provide some of that defense. 0.7 steals in 16 minutes is nothing to sneeze at there either. But as you said, if he's playing significant minutes, that means that a lot has gone wrong for this Warriors team. That covers, I think, everyone on the roster. They do have Devin Marble in it on a camp roster, but I don't expect him to make the final Golden State Warriors roster. So there is some interesting things, obviously, with the team. We're going to be really glued to see how this all pans out. Before we head out of here, I'll just give you guys my idea of the best value pick, I think, out of this team, and the guy who I think is a little bit overrated when looking at these players. If only I had the graphic on this screen in the right spot, which I don't, which is always awesome when you do things wrong. Love doing that. I'll just keep talking. There it is. Okay. I think the best value pick on this team on ESPN, DAngelo Russell, is ranked 71st. I think that's ridiculous. He is a top 30-ish type player, so that's ridiculous. And they've also got, on the other ridiculous side, ESPN, Willie CauleyStein, ranked 59th. Again, never been a top 100 player, so to expect him to jump 40 spots up in this first season with Golden State seems like absolute nonsense to me. So there's some real value plays, but Steph in consideration for number 1. Draymond jumps up. Looney's value is significantly increased. Who else we got? DAngelo I talked about. We've got Willie CauleyStein on the bust side of things, and then deeper leagues, someone who you might not be looking at is Pascal or even Jacob Evans to provide those assists. So there's a lot more fantasy intrigue with this team than what there's been in the past. Previously, it's been, oh my God, this is the most boring fantasy team we've ever had. And now there's a lot more intrigue, a lot more stuff that can go either way. So we're going to be paying a lot of attention to this team for this season. Charles, thank you for jumping on and talking about the Golden State Warriors. Of course, everyone can find you over on the Locked On Warriors podcast, so go and check out Charles over there. Charles, give us your Twitter handle plug so people can go follow you if they've got any Warriors specific questions they want to know about.
Yeah, definitely at CTH415. And I also talk a lot about bad movies too, so you can get some good takes on that too.
There you go. Go and check out Charles for bad movies and Locked On Warriors over on that podcast. You can find that podcast and this podcast, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and on Spotify. Make sure you give us both a 5-star rating and review. On YouTube, you can subscribe to me, or you should subscribe to me so you never miss an episode. Give me a thumbs up and leave a comment below, guys. Charles, thank you for coming on.
Anytime,
guys. We are done here. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya.
No problem. Hey, did you want to do
Steph Curry.